Today, I'd like to explore why the use of Taoism as an ancient philosophy advocating for libertarianism, or any political philosophy, is misguided. Taoism being mistaken for libertarianism is possibly the largest misconception surrounding Taoism. Libertarian-leaning organizations like the CATO Institute, the Liberty Fund, and the Mises Institution cite Taoism as the development of laissez-faire government in the ancient East. David Boaz wrote, "The first known libertarian may have been the Chinese philosopher Lao-tzu, who lived around the 6th century BC and is best known as the author of the Tao Te Ching." Ronald Reagan quoted the Tao Te Ching in a State of the Union address.
History records the power of the ideas that brought us here those 7 years ago. Ideas like the individual's right to reach as far and as high as his or her talents will permit, the free market as an engine of economic progress, and as an ancient Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu said, "Govern a great nation as you would cook a small fish. Do not overdo it."
The latter portion, "do not overdo it," was added by the president from his interpretation of Lao Tzu. It's not only those with an apparent agenda that interpret Taoism in this way. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, one of the best free philosophy sources on the internet, mentions that Taoist meta-ethics favor laissez-faire government. What is responsible for this large misconception of Taoism as a libertarian philosophy? To answer this question, I recalled back to my previous understanding of Taoism. Originally, my politically oriented mind had interpreted much of both the Tao Te Ching and the Chuang Tzu as a libertarian philosophy, advocating for minimal government intervention. Examining my own previous understanding, there appears to be three components to my misconception. The first of the three components comes directly from passages in the Tao Te Ching. Three particular chapters of my original reading of the Tao Te Ching, translated by John C.H. Wu, appeared laissez-faire to me. In the 17th chapter, it is written, "The highest type of ruler is one whose existence the people are barely aware. When his task is accomplished and his things have been completed, all the people say, 'We ourselves have achieved it.'" In the 57th chapter, it is written, "The more taboos and inhibitions there are in the world, the poorer the people become. The sharper the weapons the people possess, the greater confusion reigns the realm. The more clever and crafty the men, the more often strange things happen. The more articulate the laws and ordinances, the more robbers and thieves arise." And finally, in the 75th chapter, it is written, "Why are the people starving? Because those above them are taxing them too heavily. That is why they are starving." Now, it's not surprising that one would read those three chapters and interpret the laissez-faire philosophy stated by Lao Tzu. The second component of my misconception was Taoism's relationship with Confucianism. When speaking of the political philosophy of Taoism, Confucianism is almost always brought up, during which Taoism and Confucianism are described to be the two opposing ideologies of ancient Chinese politics. Joseph Adler claims that, indeed, the Confucians and Taoists, in their basic attitudes towards government, were the Democrats and Republicans respectively of ancient China, as though Confucians and Taoists were challenging each other in an election. The third and final component of my misconception was the idea of Wu Wei, often translated as non-doing, inaction, or not striving. Wu Wei, when used politically, can be interpreted identically to the term laissez-faire. Both could be interpreted as government should just let people do what they want. In addressing these misconceptions, I'd first like to start off with the second, Taoism and Confucianism. Adler's claim that Confucians and Taoists were the Democrats and Republicans of ancient China gives the narrative that the two were rival political philosophies. Adler wrote, "Taoism and Confucianism both attempted to provide a new philosophical underpinning for government and society. So long as the two philosophies are understood in contrast, the political nature of the Confucians suggests a political nature within the Taoists. However, the idea that Confucianism and Taoism stood at the opposite ends of the political spectrum is misguided, when rather, Confucianism stood as the principal political philosophy and Taoism as the principal spiritual philosophy. Burton Watson goes to lengths to describe this while introducing his translation of the Chuang Tzu. Watson writes, "Taoism was gradually overshadowed by Confucianism toward the end of the 2nd century BC. Taoist writings were not accorded by any official recognition as the basis for decisions on state and public affairs. In the intellectual world of late Zhao times, a number of rival doctrines had contended for supremacy. Lao Tzu had denounced Confucianism, Mencius and Sun Tzu had denounced Maoism, and the legalist philosopher Han Tzu had denounced both doctrines. Chuang Tzu had spent a certain amount of time attacking philosophers of other schools. But by the 1st century BC, the principal battle was between the two rival philosophies of government, Confucianism, nominally the official doctrine of the state, with its emphasis upon moral guidance of the people, and legalism, which stressed regimentation through stern and detailed laws, and held a strong attraction for the totalitarian-minded rulers and statesmen of the time. Taoism, being basically apolitical, remained in the background to be drawn upon by either side. One should therefore think of Confucianism and Taoism in Han times not as rival systems demanding a choice for one side or the other, but rather as two complementary doctrines. An ethical and political system in Confucianism for the conduct of public and family life, and a mystical philosophy in Taoism for the spiritual nourishment of the individual, with the metaphysical teachings of the Book of Changes acting as a bridge between the two. With Watson's explanation, we can see that the two philosophies were not contradictory. Rather, they simply addressed separate spheres. Although, Watson wrote that in the Han times, it was more often that Confucian scholars utilized the Taoist concept of inaction, or Wu Wei, to oppose the state monopolies and other large-scale government enterprises advocated by the legalist-minded officials. This sounds eerily similar to the modern misconception of Wu Wei. Which brings me to the next misconception. The third and final misconception surrounds Wu Wei. Interpreting Wu Wei as the ancient Chinese version of laissez-faire turns the non-political political. Wu Wei can be translated as non-action, non-doing, or the like. Those that practice Wu Wei live in harmony with the natural change that surrounds them. It is not the typical misunderstanding of Wu Wei, the simple mistaken translation of Wu Wei as simply doing nothing. This misunderstanding stems from the interpretation that Wu Wei is a demand of government, that Taoism is a political philosophy. Wu Wei is not something a government can follow. While laissez-faire is a decision of government, Wu Wei is a perspective. A hands-off approach to the economy is far different than a hands-off approach to life. Wu Wei is not something the government should rule by. Wu Wei is something one should live by. When the people properly follow Wu Wei, there will be no need for a government, as all will be in harmony. To have a government follow Wu Wei, but not the people, would lead to no less harmony than already exists. In the modern climate, Taoism may be used in defense of libertarianism. However, this isn't the only way the politics of Tao has been understood. Mao, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, used Taoism to bring Marxism to China. Both Taoism and Confucianism offered Mao a Chinese basis for a Marxist philosophy. Within Taoism, Mao adopted the yin and yang, or primordial opposites, and used it to create his own Marxist dialectic. Within Marxism, there is Hegel's thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Within Maoism, there is yin-yang and the Tao. The largest difference this caused was that while Marx viewed the class conflict as the clash between thesis and antithesis, ultimately resulting in a synthesis within communism, Mao viewed the class conflict as a continual clash that was not so due to have a synthesis. So, modern-day libertarians aren't the only one that have tried to use the Tao in a political manner. Now, readdressing the texts themselves, one must reorientate the perspective from that which sees Taoism as a political philosophy. If you read the Tao Te Ching in Chuang Tzu, as I had, strictly a political philosophy, it will consist of some vague instructions for governing, surrounded by a whole lot of irrelevant nonsense. Doing so would be to waste the value of the texts. Instead, read them as religious philosophy. This will shift one's perspective from looking for how to govern to looking for how to live. The non-political nature of Taoism is revealed in the Chuang Tzu. From the Chuang Tzu, when the sage governs, does he govern what is on the outside? He makes sure of himself first, and then he acts. The sage governs what is on the inside, his own thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. Chuang Tzu articulates that it is not the world that the sage governs, but rather himself. And Chuang Tzu does not stop there. Chuang Tzu writes, "When the way relies on little accomplishments and words rely on vain show, Then we have the rights and wrongs of the Confucians and the Maoists. What one calls right, the other calls wrong. What one calls wrong, the other calls right. Chuang Tzu has no kind words for the political disagreements that were facing China at the time. And once again, Chuang Tzu wrote, Tian Ken was wandering the sunny side of Yin Mountain, where he reached the banks of the Liao River. He happened to meet a nameless man. He questioned the man, saying, Please, may I ask how to rule the world? The nameless man said, Get away from me, you peasant. What kind of dreary question is that? I'm just about to set off with the Creator, and if I get bored with that, then I'll ride on the light and lissom bird out beyond the 6 directions, wandering in the village of not even anything, and living in the broad and borderless field. What business do you have with this talking of governing the world and disturbing my mind? But Tian Ken repeated his question. The nameless man said, Let your mind wander in simplicity. Blend your spirit with the vastness. Follow along with things the way they are, and make no room for personal views. Then the world will be governed. The nameless man did not offer any political philosophy, but rather a practical one. To make no room for personal views would be to lack all political thought. How to rule this world is not a question worth answering, for the nameless man doesn't offer any guidance to ruling, but rather an approach to life. Such is the way of Taoism. With this new non-political understanding of Taoism, one can readdress the 3 passages of the Tao Te Ching that I can reinterpret differently. The highest type of ruler is one whose existence the people are barely aware. When his task is accomplished and his things have been completed, all the people say, We ourselves have achieved it. One who is comfortable with himself feels no need to draw unnecessary attention to his actions, for his actions will speak for themselves. Back to chapter 57. As a general rule, the more complex things are made, the further they will be from nature. And we do this to ourselves. Whenever we make things complicated, we rob ourselves of happiness and peace of mind. And finally, on to chapter 75. Why are the people starving? Because those above them are taxing them too heavily. That is why they are starving. Read as political philosophy, this excerpt could be silly. The people can starve even when there are no taxes above them. However, read as religious philosophy, you can apply this to your own life. Why are you mentally starving? Because you're taxing yourself too much. You expect too much from yourself, and so you're destined to be disappointed. None of these explanations have to be your exact understanding. As with most texts, interpretations will differ. But Taoism will hold more importance to those who look for meaning within their own lives, and not of politics. From this deeper textual analysis, we can see how it would be misguided to view Taoism as simply an ancient libertarian philosophy. The understanding of Taoism as libertarianism, anarchism, or Maoism stems from an interpretation of Taoism as a political philosophy. To state that Taoism is one political philosophy or another is to be stuck in the very distinctions that Taoism warns of. So long as we are using these classifications, labeling Taoism as principally a political philosophy and not a religious philosophy is misguided. Taoism cannot be placed on the political spectrum. Taoism is not a political philosophy, it is a religious philosophy in that its principal concern is not the governing of a state, but the human condition. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Let me know anything you disagreed with in the comments below or any thoughts you have. And until next time.